We are bringing developing news and the stories behind the headlines. This is STORYCON, or the Story Conference. I'm Ed Lingao. Some stories you're watching this Monday, November 4. Tropical storm Marcy has slightly intensified as it moves over the West Philippine Sea. Over the Philippine Sea. Hindi West Philippine Sea. Marcy was last spotted 775 kilometers east of Borongan City, eastern Samar. It is expected to make landfall in the vicinity of Babuyan Islands or mainland northern Cagayan on Thursday evening or Friday early morning. Marcy may reach severe tropical storm status and could intensify to a typhoon by tomorrow or by Wednesday. President Bongbong Marcos welcomes the possible investigation into the country's flood control projects and their budgets. This follows massive flooding caused by severe tropical storm Christine and Typhoon Leon. Meantime, Marcos refused to comment on his predecessor Rodrigo Duterte's statements about the Davao Death Squad. And Senate President Chis Escudero calls on the Land Transportation Office, or the LTO, to identify the owner-user of a vehicle with protocol plate number 7. That vehicle illegally used the EDSA busway and attempted to run over an enforcer over the weekend. Escudero condemned the driver's actions and urged the involved senator to come forward and take accountability for the incident. Of course, the important thing kasi is the number 7 is a protocol number for members of the Senate.
Yes.
In the same way that 8 is the protocol number for members.
At multiple yung violation. Dumaan sa bus lane, nagbigay ng dirty finger, muntik sagasaan yung enforcer.
Walang violation ng dirty finger.
Hindi, kwan lang, impunity. Ikaw na nga yung mali, ikaw pa yung dirty finger, di ba? Ibig sabihin, talagang in a powerful position ka, tapos gagamitin mo yung position mo para sagasaan ang isang enforcer, tapos tataas mo pa yung dirty finger mo. No?
Ayan po nagsasalta ang ating pundit for any position, si Tito Ronald Llamas. At kasama natin via Zoom ang ating tita from Parañaque, si Editor-in-Chief ng Star, Amy Pamintuan.
Happy Monday, Amy!
Happy Monday, Ronald Ed.
Chismis na ba kayo kung sinong senador yon?
Wala pa nga, iniintay nga namin eh.
Lumalabas sa
Puro
social media
intay kami ngayon eh. Pati yung reaction ng Office of the Vice President dun sa yung request naman ng mga congressman na magkaroon ng lookout bulletin sa 7 members ng Office of the Vice President. Ayaw din magbigay ng reaction ng OVP. So ayan ang mga iniintay natin ngayon. And dagdagan ko lang yung kwento nyo yung tungkol dun sa pagbisita ni President Marcos sa Batangas, dun sa mga biktima ng Christine. Inorderan din yung DOST, Department of Science and Technology, and Pag-asa na ayusin daw yung pag-i-issue ng warning system. Yan, binanggit ko lang yan dahil matagal na natin pinag-uusapan yan.
Exactly how do you communicate the dangers without resorting to jargon?
Na-overwhelm kasi yung ating flood control.
Kasi kahit si Senator Amy Marcos, pinuna rin bakit daw ganon? Although yun na nga, sinabi niyo dun sa umpisa ng show, the President sa this administration is willing to be investigated dun sa mga flood control project.
Na-overwhelm kasi yung mga flood control.
Pero sabi nga nila, baka daw nakapag-prepare ng medyo maayos sa mga LGU kung maayos yung warning.
Ami, yung sinabi ni Congressman Chua na meron silang inahandang mga impeachment papers. Wala ba kayong storya doon?
Wala pa sa amin eh. Although matagal na namin iniintayan kasi ilang congressmen na nagsabi, di ba, na because of the fund misuse, it could be an impeachable offense. Pero iniintay nga nilang magsalita yung OVP. Kaso nga ayaw magbigay ng mga dokumento daw. At ayan na nga, nawawala, hindi nila ma-interview man lang yung mga opisyal ng OVP. So iniintay natin siguro mga hanggang alas 5. During office hours, maghihintay tayo kung may reaction from the OVP.
Nagulat kasi ako doon sa
dun
statement.
Sa action ng BIA, action ng DOJ. Kasi DOJ yung ni-request na kumuha sa Bureau of Immigration.
Siguro bukas pwede nating imbitahin si Congressman Chua dahil yun yung first overt admission na merong impeachment na niluluto. Usually kasi dinedenay nila
Well, yung mga bayad block, ilang linggo na sinasabi yun.
Yes.
Actually, sila yung pinakaunang nagsabi, pero wala pa rin gumagalaw So we're wondering what the hold that could be.
Iba kasi kung yung head mismo, chairman
iba rin
mismo
yun.
ng committee.
Tsaka nasa majority.
Yes.
Pag nasa majority. Pag nasa minority kasi expected naman parati na
Na gusto mag-file ng impeachment.
Although ang istorya namin kahapon, 4 na lang yung bill na sikasuhin nila before the year end Ang House siya, nasa House. Kaya hindi natin alam kung, sa bagay, napakadaling gawin niya ng House, ano? Ang problema,
mabilis.
pagdating dun sa Senate.
Impeachment
Pagdating
mabilis.
sa Senate, medyo mahaba yung trial ng impeachment. Especially since it is the Vice President.
Remember,
Well,
sa
depende.
House, 1/3 lang kailangan mo, di ba?
Depende yan sa carrot and stick.
Alam ni Tito Ronald yan.
Oo nga. Pero medyo mahirap, unpredictable yung Senate natin. As you can see naman, yun lang appearance ni former President Duterte.
Diba?
Nakita nyo naman kung ano nangyari.
Typically,
So
you would expect
medyo
the Senate to be
dahan-dahan lang, di ba?
Ang problema nila dyan, mas predictable ang Senate after the midterms. Mas mahihirapan. Mas mahihirapan sila kung mag-impeachment sila after the midterms.
Bok, balikan ko lang
Pero
yan.
Sige,
Go ahead, Amy.
Hindi, sabi ko nga, kung maraming administration, kung lumaki yung suporta ng administration, usually kasi pag midterms, malakas yung administration
Pag
So
panalo,
kung mas marami dyan ang pinag-uusapan lang naman natin ilang senador yan na kung matatanggal, hindi mananalo, madadagdagan yung administration, at yun na nga, sabihin mo, gamitan ng carrot and stick, mas may pag-asa. Di ba?
Pero
Na
marami dyan, Ami, pag
pwedeng matanggal.
panalo na, hindi na dependent sa Malacanang. Pag panalo na sila. Ngayon nga, dependent sila dahil sa administration slate sila. Tingnan mo naman yung ASTA last Senate hearing. Diba? Parang hindi sila administration. Paano ba pag panalo na?
Tingnan natin.
Paano pa pag mas malapit na dun sa next election?
Na presidential.
So medyo nakalayo na dun sa midterm nakapasok na di ba? So typically, di ba, they're more for the administration but as you go down the line, as the months get spent.
Naninigurado na sila.
Okay. Teka, before you bring in si Richard Heydarian, one more question. Yung protocol plates ba usually one protocol plate for front or back and then the regular plate or parehong protocol plate?
Well, usually dyan may isang protocol plate tapos merong isang yung tunay na regular plate.
So you should still display one regular plate.
Pero kung film mo kasi, no? Hindi lang dalawa, harap tsaka sa likod. Papatungan mo yung bubong.
Siguro. I asked it kasi kung protocol plates ang nakalagay front and back, you have no way almost of identifying the vehicle owner. Especially, Congress has 300 members
pero yung make ng car kasi, pwede mong...
Yeah, but you know,
dahil...
if you have 300 members of Congress
kami ngayon,
it's a
excuse
Fortuner.
me.
Hindi, kung senador.
Ed, excuse me, may breaking kami. Sabi ng LTO, fake daw yung protocol plate.
Baka nabili
Yang
sa Lazada.
pumasok na yan.
Oo, baka...
Na yung number 7 na nakadikit sa Escalade, na trace daw nila na fake.
Baka pogo.
Yan lang yung ngayon ka lang, kapapasok pa lang.
But I wonder how they traced it.
Ang detalye niyan.
Nakita ba yung regular plate
Yung regular plate.
sa likod or they just assume it's fake?
Hindi ko alam yung
Siguro
yung
may,
detalye pa.
may batayan sila.
Sana may batayan sila.
May batayan sila. Hindi naman pwedeng hulaan lang yun.
Kaya sana nga may batayan talaga sila.
May conduction sticker, di ba?
Oh yeah, may conduction sticker.
May conduction sticker yan. Baka kinumpare nila sa conduction sticker.
But if they saw the conduction sticker, then they should be able to identify the owner na.
Yan na nga. Fake nga ibig sabihin. Hindi sa senador yan.
Balak lang mag-senador.
Baka kandidato.
Balak lang tumakas sa traffic ng undas.
Okay, Bok, Ronald, Amy, let's bring in Professor Richard Heydarian, our favorite analyst for geopolitical issues.
Senador din ba yan? Naka-7 din bang plaka yan? Yung Heydarian.
Mukhang naka-7 eh.
007.
Hi, Richard.
007.
007.
007.
Long time no see, Richard.
Kinakasama niyo, hindi ko kilaling co-host niyo.
What have you
Sino ba
been
yan?
doing? What have you been doing, Richard?
Matagal ko hindi nakita
Debating
yan.
with Sasot? Debating ka ba kay Sasot?
Agagaling yun niya sa flu, huwag mo lokohin.
Or nagkukumpu sa BGC.
Oy, Ronald, good to see you, bro.
Well, teka, kayo talaga, una ba sabihin niyo, let's go down to, well, sir, ganito kasi, it's already the 4th of November. Everybody's excited for the US elections. Mukhang down the wire, kung meron man lumalamang, it's all within the margin of error at this point, eh. So, it's all up for grabs. But remind us again, what would be the implication if you have Trump winning for the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and the world?
Kakantahan Alicia ni Digong na My Way.
Well, I mean, first of all, let's not forget that since 2016, there's a big argument that all of the polls are broken, right? Yung record of polls in terms of predicting Trump's victory in 2016, predicting Democratic victory, not only in 2020, but also 2022 elections, midterm elections, sobrang poor yung performance ng mga polls. So I think we have to take the polls with a grain of salt, and not to mention, ang daming mga swing voters and counties na nagsiswing back and forth. I mean, just few years ago, we had Kamala Harris finally making a pitch saying that she's gonna go for a Gaza ceasefire now, all in na siya, because she realizes she needs the Muslim American votes, Arab American votes, especially in places like Michigan on her side. So ang dami mga 11th hour, almost 12th hour swings back and forth. So it's really hard to say. And then there was a couple, I look at least 3 different polls over the past 16 hours suggesting different things. Kamala doing well in Iowa, some of them showing that Trump is doing much better right now in the past 10 hours or so in some of the swing states. In Nevada, the Filipino-American community, including some of my relatives, could play an important role, extremely important role in determining who will be the next president of the United States. So I think, first of all, we have to park that. Now, speaking of Trump, well, the thing is this. There's always this bilateral relationship, and then there's the world, right? As far as the bilateral relationship with the U.S. is concerned, kung sino kausapin mo, I think among the Filipino strategic elites, starting with Ambassador Romualdez, people in the government, a lot of them are actually optimistic even more with Trump, because they know that with Trump, he's going to be more aggressive on China. But more importantly, the people he'll bring into the administration. His former National Security Advisor, C. O'Brien, openly called in an article in the Foreign Affairs magazine that we should help the Philippines almost similar to countries like Israel. Meaning we're talking about billions of dollars of aid potentially. Elbridge Colby, someone we had on our show here in One News before, and on my own podcast also, has made it very clear that the Philippines is a frontline state. We have to help it big time. So a lot of Trump guys are saying, forget about Ukraine, let's do something about the Middle East, but the key focus should be Asia and China, and key countries like the Philippines should get all the help they need. So I'm not surprised a lot of Filipinos, including ordinary Filipinos and Filipino Americans, are very excited about the potential return of Trump to the presidency. But that's just the bilateral relationship. But I think what people are not taking into consideration is, A, we might get an even more unpredictable version of Trump, and a lot of these good people who could be hired could be fired later on. But more importantly, we don't know what Trump is going to do in other parts of the world. If he gets into war in the Middle East, for instance, which is not impossible, as we look at this ping pong of missiles between two regional powers, then if the US gets bogged down in the Middle East, no matter how much Trump wants to be anti-China, he's not going to be in a position to help us. If he gets the Ukraine conflict or the escalation wrong, he's going to pick fight with the Europeans and give the Russians a lot of incentive. So I think the problem I see with a lot of analysis is that they try to isolate Philippine-US relations as if hindi tayo apektado sa ginagawa ng US sa iba't ibang rehiyon ng mundo. At as if alam natin exactly ang gagawin ni Trump down the road, and whether yung mga tao na sa paligid niya mananatili sila down the road, assuming they want to do what they want to do. So there are lots of known unknowns, not to mention unknown unknowns, and that's why I think we have to prepare for the worst, and while at the same time I understand that many people are hoping for the best under a Trump presidency.
Pero as you
Richard,
said,
what about economically? Make America great again, di ba? He wants to bring
Yes.
back American investments. How do you think it will affect us economically?
So that's the area where we have more concrete concerns, right? So first of all, Trump said he might impose up to 60% tariffs, right, on some of the
Yes.
countries in China. Now, considering how the supply chains in this part of the world are super integrated, if matamaan ng China, matamaan din tayong lahat. It's just a question of who's going to be less. Probably us less, because we're not as dependent on China. But it's very hard to say that any attack on China's economy will not affect adversely the entire region. Korea, Japan, all of these countries that we deal with also are dependent on the Chinese supply chains. Ambassador Romualdez told me earlier this year that when it comes to the free trade, area, they're going to push for what they can push. But I think realistically, what the Philippines want to do under Trump is baka wala tayong makuha na free trade agreement, bilateral free trade agreement. Malabo yan. Malabo rin yan under Democrats, just to be clear. But what we might go is what are targeted investments, semiconductors. For instance, we can be an alternative production site, especially as Taiwan becomes hotter and more uncertain. And also, there's a push to make the Philippines the top supplier of nickel. Because lahat ng mga EV battery mines ay na-dominate ng China, from Indonesia to Latin America to Africa. So I think the strategy there is, if Trump's coming to power, we're going to position ourselves as the preferred trusted producer of sensitive materials and suppliers of critical minerals. And I think that's very doable under the name of national security. So even if there's MAGA protectionism, I think that's very much doable. So it's a mitigated disaster, and at the same time, a lot of opportunities there.
But
if someone like Trump comes to office.
But Richard, why should they do that here? Eh, ang taas ng kuryente rito. Paano sila magtatayo ng semiconductor industry? Paano sila magpo-process ng nickel? That will entail huge requirements sa energy. But why not just do it in Indonesia? Na mas mababa.
Well, the Indonesian one is completely dominated by China. The whole supply chain is taken over by China. So the idea here is I come 50, you come 50, meaning Philippines will make certain arrangements. Kumbaga, in certain areas, electricity will be subsidized, or some of the oligarchs in the Philippines will get involved in a way that they'll also take benefits. But at the same time, we're hoping Japan, we're hoping Korea, we're hoping Americans also put their way in. So this is kind of a long-term strategic investment, meaning even if pangit yung investment conditions in the Philippines, because China has dominated so much of the mining, EV production in much of the world, konti na lang, Philippines is the second largest producer of nickel. So there's so much room for improvement.
That doesn't happen.
So there's a reason to invest in us. And it's not like Indonesia and Africa are not corrupt too.
But Richard,
so
that
Ronald,
takes time. That
but
doesn't
my point
happen.
is there's also a strategic reason for this.
That doesn't happen overnight. Iba na presidente pag medyo nasisimula na yung ganyang klaseng proseso. Lalo na sa Philippines, ang daming permit na kinakailangan. Ang daming processes na kinakailangan. Lalong-lalo na, again, do sa source of energy. Kung magkakaroon, never tayo nag-subsidize ng electricity eh. So kung magkakaroon yan, ang habang proseso niyan. So, ang sinasabi ko lang ay you have 3 years from now, a new president. So, ibig sabihin, baka magbago yung foreign policy. Depende sa kung sino magiging next president. No?
My sense, Ronald, if Trump comes to power, they're going to make sure that the next Filipino president is someone who's on friendly terms, meaning I think the U.S. will play a more active role to support the institutionalization of whatever they're going to do. Also, you're absolutely correct, Ronald. It's going to be a package of industrial, military strategies. Look at it, Ronald. The Americans are going to put Typhoon missile systems here almost permanently. They're going to have more access to EDCA. You think the Americans will just sit idly by if another Duterte or pro-China person will come to power? I doubt about it. So I think the Americans are going to get more and more invested in the Philippines for the long haul. And the Marcos administration will juice that. And so much so also for a lot of strategic elite in the Philippines who see China as the #1 threat. So I agree with everything you say. What I'm also saying is that the ground is shifting as we speak. And many of the elements are happening behind the scenes. And it's not like US. Japan is also very invested in where the Philippines is going to go over the coming years. And Japan has the money and technology and the incentive to come to the Philippines no matter how problematic the investment community is. So I understand everything you're saying there. But my point is that is the direction of the wind, as you always want to say, because China is seen as a strategic threat and the Philippines is now seen as a frontline state. Yeah. My sense is if Trump becomes the president, that will be the dominant narrative. So we have to buckle up because it will be much harder for the Philippines to hedge and play games, because if Trump comes in, he wants the Philippines to be very clear. Are you with us or are you going to play games there and you're on your own essentially? So it's going to be really risky and difficult too. But for the Filipinos who want us to take a tougher stance on China, they would love to have someone like Trump. Now, where you and I stand, that's a long conversation. But I'm just laying out the big picture here.
The only problem is ang track record ng US at Japan, hindi naman niya nagbubuhos ng pera sa eleksyon eh. Unlike China. China, walang hindrance eh. Kung sakali magbubuhos sila ng resources sa kandidato nila. The Americans and the Japanese, not too much. Pwedeng mag-invest sila sa military spending, a few trade deals here and there. Pero in terms of investment sa election, medyo malayo sila sa China.
Wala akong sinasabi, Ronald, just to be clear. The Americans, for instance, could help investing in the capacity of COMELEC or institutions to detect money coming from China. They can share intelligence with us. that will show that politician A, B, and C are getting money from China. So they don't have to support the pro-US elements. That's the majority. All they have to do is to help the Philippine government to track down the Chinese money, the money trail. And that will be enough for this administration. So they can incapacitate, they can strengthen and empower the current administration in the Philippines to do the job. By the way, Ronald, let's not forget the Reuters report that showed that the Pentagon allegedly was spreading stuff against the Chinese vaccines. I mean, for me, that was awesome. To be honest, I think that was ridiculous because they didn't need to do that because there was already a lot of science saying that. But I think we're being naive if we assume that the Americans may not also push the bottom here and there. But my sense is it's just so anti-China in the Philippines and so pro-US that the US doesn't have to intervene in their elections. All they have to do is to strengthen the ability of the Philippine government to do what it does and to detect pro-China elements, and the rest the Philippine government will take care of that. So it's more indirect. So I agree, they're not going to come in and do mumbo jumbo election interference a la 1953 or 1960s and all, but I think there's still a lot they can do. And this is going to be a second Trump administration if ever. I think they're going to be much more aggressive than ever. I think we're going to see an all-out new Cold War in the coming years. It's much more likely than not.
Richard, there's a lot of talk about the Trump presidency. What about the Kamala Harris presidency? Ano yan? Meron bang minuses yun for us, for the Philippines?
No, I don't think so. I think, if of all, sabi ko nga, even if things go south under the next president, whoever it is, Kamala or Trump, I think will be the first class cabin in a sinking Titanic ship, assuming US goes down. But actually, I'm not very sure about that. I think with Kamala also, she has fantastic relationship with the Philippines. Remember, she visited the Philippines back in 2022. She went to Palawan. She was aboard a Coast Guard watch. She was also, I think, in an event with journalists here. If I'm not mistaken, Rappler and some of the folks, she was asked about human rights. You could see she's very nimble. She's very capable. She can navigate the Philippine politics. And she's also of Asian background. She'll be the first ever, not only African-American and woman president, but she'll be also the first Asian president. She understands a part of the world very well, almost viscerally. So I think Kamala will also be a very competent person should she come in terms of handling bilateral relations. So I honestly don't understand the Filipinos who so hate Kamala as if I mean, she's going to be continuity of Biden, but I think it's going to be a much more humane, compassionate version of Biden on some issues like Gaza, for instance. I think she is going to have the more personal touch, and she's younger. She's more dynamic. I expect Kamala to have a state visit to the Philippines should she become the president. She has already made that visit as a vice president. Biden was, to be honest, he was not in the spring of his youth, summer of his youth. So he didn't visit the Philippines for a state visit or anything. So I think you're going to see more and better version of Biden should Kamala Harris win. So either way, I think there are a lot of pluses that the Philippines can look at. But obviously with Trump, it's like there could be more plus, but there could also be more minuses. It's much bigger strategic gamble, except we don't have a vote in here. So it's a gamble that we didn't pay for or we didn't have a power on. So we just have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
But Richard, if we zoom in a bit, for example, in specific issues, Trump versus Harris, for example, EDCA sites.
It won't change.
If you're looking, well, it was
Biden. It will not change.
It will not
Whether
change.
Trump or Biden, hindi magbabago yan. Mas ang magiging problema ng US, it's the most polarized election. This early, sineset na ni Trump yung template na pag siya inatalo, daya. Kaya sineset na niya yung template para sa kanya mga troops to have another January 6. It might make January 6 look like a picnic kung matatalo si Trump this election. Na may possibility na matalo kahit siya ay slightly ahead dun sa swing states. So, ang manghihina rito ay yung US vis-a-vis the world. No? They would look terrible dito sa polarization na ito.
Not just vis-a-vis the world, US vis-a-vis its own democracy.
Hindi, exactly. Kung weakened at saka divided ang US, anong itsura nila sa mundo?
Yeah. But Ronald, let's not forget, there's something I didn't mention, no? Trump, if you look at their, I don't want to forget about the 2025 agenda, whatever. It's very likely they'll be very strict on immigration issue. So another reason I wonder why a lot of Filipinos are so excited about Trump president is like, wait, if you have relatives and family or TNT in the US, oh my goodness, the ICE and the agents in the US are going to have more power than ever. We're going to have people like Miller, right, who has this very aggressive immigration policy. So a lot of Filipino Americans or a lot of Filipinos residing in US in let's say gray area, legal gray area, could get hurt very bad if ever some of these speculations about a second Trump president come true. Not to mention, maybe going to the US will also be much more difficult for a lot of Filipinos who want to rejoin or revisit their families. So I think it's quite a lot. It's quite interesting to me that a lot of Filipinos are not looking at that aspect. Like, I hear a lot of Filipino Americans or Filipinos with Filipino American families saying, "Oh, it's good, yeah, America has to have, that build that wall. All of these people from South America coming." I said, yeah, but it's not like it's only those people are going to be affected. A lot of Filipino Americans will be affected. A lot of Filipinos who want to migrate to the U.S. or visit their family will be affected. So that's one area where I think we have to curb our enthusiasm about a second Trump presidency.
Richard, I don't know if this is true, but let me tell you something that I've been hearing over and over again. The immigrant community in the U.S. is supposedly one of the most anti-immigrant communities.
Hindi naman,
They're more protective.
Hindi naman.
They're quite protective of the rights that they've already acquired and the privilege.
Hindi naman. Halimbawa, Hispanics, 57% Kamala, 35% Trump. Halimbawa, ang blacks, 86% Kamala, 11% Trump. So kung titignan mo yung mga migrants,
Yung Pilipino.
Filipino 60-40.
Yung Pilipino.
Pero long time migrants yung mga yan.
Filipino
They've settled there already.
Yung
60 for Trump.
40 for Trump, 60 for Kamala. So ibig sabihin, yes, malaki pa rin, significant pa rin yan, pero hindi totoo na overwhelming yung support ng migrants kay Trump. Significant
But
yung support
Ronald, the direction is the important thing. We see more and more Asian Americans, more and more Latino Americans going towards Trump. In fact, one reason Trump is so strong is how he was able to get support from minorities, Latino community.
But Richard, this is higher than yung 2016.
So it's a direction which is, I think, dropping.
Ang titingnan mo, Richard, yung movement. Nung kay panahon ni Clinton, halos tie yung Hispanics, Trump-Clinton. Dito, medyo lamang si Kamala. Sa Hispanics, ibig sabihin, the movement is medyo nare-realize ng significant sections ng migrant community na delikado sila kay Trump. Kahit significant pa rin yung support ni Trump.
But if your reference point is Obama, the Democrats are bleeding a lot. In fact, among African-American male, they're not doing very well, including in swing states like Georgia, for instance. Yes, if your reference point is 30 years ago, maybe, but if my reference
Clinton,
point is Obama,
2016.
versus 2024, it's not
my reference is Hillary, 2016.
Si Hillary pala.
Well,
Richard, may fearless forecast ka ba? Richard, may fearless forecast ka ba? Kasi yung mga polls ngayon mas malala pa nung kay Hillary, mas malawak ng konti yung ano niya noon Yung
Hillary was plus 6%.
Hillary won all the surveys.
Meron ka bang fearless forecast?
All the surveys panalo si Hillary nun.
Biden was plus 10. Harris was tied. So in terms of even popular vote, it's possible Trump will win both popular vote and electoral college. All I can say, and I agree with Ronald here, the only thing we can be certain about is that it will be the most contentious and it will be really contested election. We know on the ground there are many MAGA people who will most likely refuse to certify the election results if they don't think it will go well, whether it's in Pennsylvania, whether it's in other swing states. So it's going to be more like Philippines, whereby walang matatalo, lahat panalo. And it's going to be very contentious and
Nadaya.
So I'm surprised we won't know the result until the end of this week, or it will not be accepted by Trump forever, essentially.
Because this
Trump
election
needs to win. He could face criminal cases. That guy is desperate to win.
And this election will be determined by a few thousand votes.
This is uncharted territory. So I think we're fooling ourselves to think this is just another elections that within hours there will be a projection. It will be even possible that different channels will project differently. Yung nakita natin sa Succession, season 5, it's possible that one channel will call it for Trump and another for another channel. I mean, those scenarios are more likely than not. So that's why both Kamala and Trump have a huge, humongous legal team who are going to contest it one by one. But one reason siguro the Democrats are more worried is the Supreme Court is dominated by Republicans. At least 3 of them have been by Trump. So if things go crazy into the Supreme Court, it might not look that good for the Democrats. And not to mention, there's also another possibility na mag-tie sa Electoral College. I think it's possible both get 269. Under some scenario. In that scenario, it goes to the U.S. House of Congress. So I know these things sound crazy and out of this world, but it's more likely than not now than any time in the past 50, if not 100 years. So brace for the most exciting U.S. elections. And tayo naman sa Pilipinas dahil Sanay tayo sa mga contested
Dito
election.
araw-araw exciting.
Exactly. So,
Richard.
welcome to our world. Yun lang
Pero
masasabi ko sa
Richard,
mga
this
kaibigan
election
natin
will be
sa Amerika.
determined by a few thousand voters. A few thousand.
Ah.
No? Yun yung magdidetermine. At sabi nga nila, whoever gets Pennsylvania will win the election. Just one state, Pennsylvania.
Okay, Bongbok, we just have to take a break. We will continue the conversation about the U.S. election after a quick break. Stay tuned for STORYCON.
This is the Story Conference Group or the STORYCON Group.
Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Kamala, you're fired. Get out. Get out. You're fired.
There is a yearning in our country for a president who sees the people, who gets you and who will fight for you. That is what this election is about.
We got developing news and stories behind headlines. Welcome back to the STORYCON or the Story Conference. I'm Ed Lingao, and still with us, Amy Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, and a resident political pundit, Tito Ronald Llamas, and of course, geopolitical analyst Richard Heydarian. Sir, let me go back to you. The impression I'm getting is that whatever happens tomorrow and on Wednesday, it's either Trump wins or manggugulo si Trump.
Wins or Trump wins, right? I mean, it's just the version of,
I didn't want to put it that way.
Trump wins.
Sige,
But
yun
again,
nga yun.
well, actually, monitoring over the past 48 hours or so, online on Twitter already, there I don't want to say it's a script, but there are already some would say disinformation, or some would say psychological warfare,
Conditioning.
mind condition, kung saan sinasabi kong matalo si Trump, ito yung mga dahilan. So as we speak, there's already the predicate being set by some of the partisans of MAG. I'm not saying they're necessary from campaign of Trump, but these are the talking points that will come out in the coming days. So from Arizona to Pennsylvania to a lot of these swing states, hard-fought swing states, there are going to be most likely a lot of people who will they refuse to certify the election result if it doesn't go Trump's way, or will contest it over and over again and overwhelm the system, including the American judiciary, with a lot of complaints. So really buckle up. I mean, I would be shocked if this election had a seamless transition. Because I'll tell you what, if Trump wins also, but it's very close, who tells you that the other side will also accept it nicely? I think we keep on talking about Trump not accepting the results. That's 100%. But I think some people are also underestimating, maybe not Kamala, but are underestimating a lot of people in the Democratic Party, anti-Trump elements, who will also perhaps be very reticent to certify or to accept a Trump presidency. So you may see, in a situation where Trump wins, that will also not be a seamless transition. I remember I was in the US in 2016. As soon as Trump won, there were already protests within hours in front of his tower there in Manhattan. So I won't be surprised. We'll see even more on steroids version of that, because this election is even more polarized than
Pero
the 2016.
I doubt, Richard, kung yung Democrats lulusubin yung Capitol.
Oh, January 6th is
They
one
they
thing.
won't attack the
No,
Capitol.
I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
necessarily the same way, but you could see a lot of bottom-up pressure, grassroots pressure for something to be done. So it goes down to Biden. I think this is where Biden's role will be very important. If ever they don't win, it's important that Biden comes out and says, this is about the Constitution, this is about transfer of power, you may not like the result, but this is what we have to do. The difference with last time, during the January 6th attack, is that time it was Trump who was the president. This time Biden is the president, so I think Biden as the president can play an important role in smoothening that transition. But I'm just saying, I don't see it at the same level, but it's also very likely that the other side will also not easily accept it. Should Trump win, and the margins are very, very close.
Ang
very,
medyo
very
strange
close.
dito, Christian. Usually,
Christian.
usually Richard. Usually, sorry.
Ibang programa yun.
Oo, ibang channel. Usually, Richard, lahat
Yari ka sa ano.
lahat ng previous elections sa US, pag maganda ang economy, yung incumbent ang panalo. Or at least yung kandidato ng incumbent. In this case, relatively maganda ang economy ngayon. Sabi nga nila, soft landing. Pero bakit ganun pa rin kalakas si Trump? Bakit ganun pa rin kadikit? Naiiba itong election na ito. Dahil usually, pag okay ang economy, no, sabi nga ni Clinton, it's the economy, stupid. No? Panalo yung incumbent or yung kanyang kandidato. Bakit ngayon ay napaka-tight?
It's the inflation. It's the inflation, stupid. If there's gonna be an
Hindi, pero
updated
na-temper nila inflation.
Inflation hurt the Gen Zs a lot. Younger Americans cannot afford, so housing costs are extremely high. I remember asking my cousins, the interest rates 5-6 years ago was 2%. Now the interest rate is what, 6%, 7%? Housing is very expensive, extremely expensive. The poorest of poor Americans, Gen Z, new generation Americans, a lot of them have been turned off because parang sa Pilipinas, ang ganda ng macroeconomic, yung overall growth. Pero in terms of trickling down, in terms of impact sa most vulnerable, things have not been very good over the past years. Only now nag-slow down yung inflation. So yung high interest rate era affected housing, and high inflation until recently also very severely affected the more vulnerable sections of the American society, and also the youth. A lot of youth, Gen Zs, were turned off by the economic track record. But that combined with immigration, this fear-mongering around immigration, and legitimate concerns about the messy border issue in the United States, which is a bipartisan fault, perhaps even Trump's fault for not allowing it to pass earlier this year. That is also playing on each other. So Ronald, you're absolutely right that historically, when economy is somewhere along where we are seeing it right now, it shouldn't be too bad for the government. But what we're also seeing is that now people care about the trickle-down effects of that. Now people care about immigration in ways perhaps they were not as much concerned. And culture wars. These culture wars are really, really something that we have to... It has been going on for quite some time, of course. Since Nixon, we can talk about it. But now, the abortion rights issue on the side of the Democrats versus the immigration issue on the side of Trump, this clash is something quite unprecedented, I would say.
Richard, what about the film community? Kasi medyo, we have the impression na unusually strong yung suporta ng film for Trump. Of course, as Ronald pointed out, mas malakas pa din yung sa Democrat, pero malakas siya, di ba, for the Republican agenda. Bakit ganun, apart from immigration?
We're number one before, right? In
Abortion.
terms of Asian American support for Trump. Well, one reason is a lot of Filipinos in the U.S., including a lot of our relatives, work in the military, in security services. So remember, Trump increased their pensions, increased their salaries a lot. So we saw that also with Duterte in the Philippines, right? That's one thing with populist right-wing leaders. They take care of the military. They take care of law enforcement, armed forces. So that's why Trump has an unusually high. But at the same time, if you look at patterns of immigration, especially first-generation Philippine Americans, those who went there in the 80s, 90s, 70s, they have much more conservative point of view that I think much more aligns with Trump than this more, some would say, woke or progressive cultural predisposition that we're seeing on the other side. And then, again, I'm not an expert on this, but at least I'm hearing a lot about how Trump did a good job in terms of reaching out to the Catholic American community. Jeff Vance is Catholic. A lot of influencers, alt-right influencers, people close to, are also very close to at least a conservative version of Catholicism that I think is much more palatable or amenable to a lot of Filipino and Latinos who are also Catholic background. Not to mention this family values debate, all of these things versus the more minority rights focus of Democrats. So this is, again, you see where the culture war is actually benefiting Trump. Because it allows him to present himself, ironically, for someone, I mean, we know his personal life and background, right? Present himself as a family man, as a social conservative man, and that appeals to a lot of Filipinos. Now, obviously, the younger generation Filipinos, second generation, etc., a lot of them are more Democrat, and a lot of them back in the day were more Bernie Sanders and progressive. So another thing we were not saying is the third-party candidates. I think I saw one number in Pennsylvania, 2% went to third-party candidate. So it's very possible that Kamala could lose this because a lot of progressives just couldn't stand her on a lot of issues, including Gaza issue, for instance, or they feel she's not as progressive as they want her to be. So one reason that could also cost Kamala Harris votes is also defection from within the ranks of Democrats, especially by more progressive elements who are also not happy with this outcome. So that's one element we didn't talk about. And speaking of third-party candidate, I think defection by RFK Jr., who was getting 4 to 5% of the vote, to Trump explains why Trump is so competitive right now, even in popular vote. I think had RFK Jr. perhaps not defected fully to Trump and progressives did not defect as much to third party, this race would not have been as close as we see right now, including in popular vote, not only in electoral college vote.
Tsaka Ami, 40% ng pro-Trump ng mga PhilAm usually are seniors. At ang issue nila is abortion and divorce. Yun yung very strong sa kanila. Na kaya sila ay anti-Democrat. Doon naman malakas ang mga Democrat sa kababaihan. Majority ng mga American women are pro-Democrats because of the reproductive health na kasama yung abortion. Yung mga Pinoy naman, lalo na yung seniors, galit na galit sa issue ng abortion tsaka divorce.
But let me pitch in one more question.
One reason I was not surprised with a lot of Filipinos supporting Trump is, I also know a lot of people, now I'm gonna throw the grenade. Marami akong kilala na pro-Lenny pero pro-Trump din. And I asked how does that make sense, right? Plus Lenny is supposed to be anti-Duterte. They said, no, you're getting it wrong. It's about family values, social values, conservative values. So, that made me realize, for many people, they're looking at Trump not for everything else that people are critical of. They look at him as the forebearer of conservative values, including Catholic values. So I think that's where medyo humina yung strategy ng Democrats. I think the Democrats should not have allowed the Republicans to monopolize the family values issue. Why should they only have the family values issue? From Obama to Biden, if you look at the first families, these are very tight-knit families, very strong values. Biden is a Catholic. He has a strong values. But for some reason, I don't think Democrats have done as much outreach to the Catholic and conservative communities on the social values front in the ways that they could have. Biden tried that with quite some success. Even Obama tried that. Even Bill Clinton to a certain degree. So one of the things we are seeing here is that Trump was so effective in monopolizing this. Oh, we are the family values party. And I think that explains also why a lot of older generation Filipinos are very much palatable to Trump's message.
Pero yun nga, aside from the abortion issue, how was Trump able to project himself as the symbol of family values and conservatism?
Well, yung evangelical churches kasi sa US are Republicans.
Yeah.
Yung evangelical church. It's not even the Catholics. Mas malaki yung evangelicals kaysa sa Catholic church. Kaya yun yung base ng Republicans.
Yeah, pero in the end, how was Trump able to capture everybody in the Republican Party?
Look at it. Look at his big family, right? They're all there. I mean, yes, you can talk about his divorce and background and all. But look at his events, whether it's the Madison Square event in New York the other day, although of course there was some controversy, the horrible comments by some comedians. And then if you look at the essentially the nomination, his kids are always there, right? So you can always say, yeah, Trump, he had divorces, failed marriages, but he's the man of family. Literally, he will have his sons, his daughters, all of them coming there. I mean, look at it. Even people who are part of his campaign are his daughter, his son-in-laws. One of his son-in-laws is actually Tiffany.
Yeah, but
Tiffany's
that
husband.
sounds more like nepotism
He's the Lebanese American.
Baka mas mahalagang sagot sa tanong mo, Ed, ay American voters are not very intelligent.
Let's not go there. Because I don't know how we go
That's
there.
why
They can overlook the sex scandals, Richard. They can overlook the sex scandals, yung corruption scandals. Bakit ganon?
They're not
Parang
very
ba sila,
intelligent.
Hindi ko nasasabihin kung sino yung kapareho.
I
Yung
mean,
mga voter doon.
I think both I and Ronald have used this term. We live in a political multiverse.
Multiverse, there you go.
Yeah.
Nation ecosystem. I mean, I talk to family members who are relatives who are Republican. They don't see what we see. They don't read New York Times. They don't listen to Ezra Klein or whatever. They listen to a completely different world, right? Whatever the new version of Rush Limbaugh, whatever is out there, it's a completely isolated, silo-driven information ecosystem. So I know many Americans, intelligent Americans, engineers, doctors, who are in a completely different universe of information. So that's why I don't agree necessarily with Ronald that this is a question of high or low information. It's just a complete multiverse, right?
Stupidity.
So lahat naman nakikita natin,
It's about
nakikita
stupidity.
They look at it as a conspiracy of the deep state against Trump, yung judiciary daw nila sa New York bias against Trump. So actually, Trump looks like the victim.
Ikaw,
He
Manny
looks
Mugato,
like
naniniwala ka ba na
conspiracy,
intelligent
and that
ang
conspiratorial mindset
American
is very
voters?
strong in America.
Ito, may kwan dito, si Manny Mugato, hindi daw intelligent ang American voters. So, bottom line.
Wala na kayong visa pag si Trump na bahala kayo dyan.
Silang dalawa lang yun.
Ay, hindi na ako pupunta ron. Hindi na
Kami sinisigurado namin, dire-diretso balik.
kanila na.
Bok, I have one more question. Many expected that after January 6, the January 6 attack on the Capitol, that signaled the end of Trump's political career. That was the impression then. Parang wala na, patay na to. But after a couple of years, now he's neck and neck.
Dahil kailangan babaan mo yung standard mo eh.
Again, let me do the other version. Ed, I was in South Carolina and Georgia earlier this year. I was talking to a lot of people who are Nikki Haley fans. I even met some people who are DeSantis fans. I think one thing happened there is that despite the diminution in Trump's support initially because of January 6 and all of that, especially after nung na-convict siya, he was so effective in presenting himself as a victim, he rallied the Republican Party around him. So completely na-decimate yung momentum ni Nikki Haley. In the case of DeSantis, I think he had I won't say a meltdown, but he really had a poor performance. I expected him to do better in the debates and all of that. So it's also because there were no viable alternatives in the Republican Party. Nikki Haley tried, she did quite well until a certain point. But once na si Trump, he played the victim card very well. So speaking of paradox, Ami, the other thing with Trump is he's so good in presenting himself as the victim.
Yes.
Look at that guy. Does he look like
Magaling siya.
so good? He's so
Magaling
good.
sa packaging.
Sobrang
Natuto
magaling.
sa TV.
Duterte wants to do that in the Philippines. So, I think if you're Duterte, you're watching Trump, can I do the same thing, look like a victim? He tried it last week in Senate, but I'm not sure he's anywhere. Magaling si Trump eh. Sobrang galing niya in rhetorically.
Natuto dun sa Apprentice, sa TV show.
Kamala Harris, you're fired.
Entertainer. Entertainer siya, entertainer.
Tapos yung garbage statement ni Biden, ayun, sakay kagad siya sa garbage truck. Di ba? O, di ba? Nagamit kagad
He
niya.
had an assassination attempt on him. Who was
Yeah.
that?
Assassination them,
Hands up. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, for all his showmanship, maybe a cynical part of his, he's such a showman that even at that
Yes.
moment of almost life and death,
He is
the
a showman.
So this is politics, Ronald. You know this better than us. You know,
Performative
knows about
politics.
and Trump is so effective.
Okay.
Alam niyo na kung bakit nakasama sa mga listahan ngayon si Ronald, or senator.
Kasi Ronald, bata ka ng visa.
Parang hindi maganda yung hugot na yun, no?
Oh, teka. We need to go. We need to say goodbye to Richard. Sir, maraming salamat for joining us this afternoon. Geopolitical analyst Richard Heydarian. We're going overtime already. So tama na.
Dapat favorite geopolitical analyst.
Okay.
At saka yung kasama mo, nakalimutan ang pangalan niya. Ronald pala, sorry. Saka si Amy. Yes.
Sorry na po.
Thank
Sorry
you.
na po.
Mamaya tawagin kanyang Christian ulit. Sika. Okay, thanks for joining STORYCON today. Amy Pamintuan, the editor-in-chief of the Philippine Star, and Tito Ronald Llamas, our resident political pundit. Join us again tomorrow at 4 p.m. for the STORYCON. I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
This is the Story Conference Group or the StoryCon Group.